Hello everyone, I'm George from Ireland. Now behind me is the house of Georgios Seferis. It's also the Greek embassy here in London. I'm on Upper Brook Street. He's known as George Seferis in English, but anyway, I'm just pronouncing it the Greek way because that was his real name. The plaque says George though. So Seferis is best known for winning the Nobel Prize for Literature for his poetry. He obviously composed in his native language. Now, I've only dipped into a tiny bit of his poetry in English, so that's only as good as a translation, and of course, that could never give me all the aesthetic pleasure of reading in the original, and I know virtually no Greek, so I just simply can't do that. Anyway, sometimes you just can't translate the scansion or the rhyme scheme, or maybe might be some imagery or turns of phrase which lose much in translation. But he's well known for other reasons as well. As a diplomat, really, as a grand old man of Greek democracy. He was born near Izmir in what's now Turkey. That city was then called Smyrna. And there was a large Greek community there, had been there for millennia, as the Greeks might point out, that was Greek long before the Turks ever came close, because of course the Turks started out in what's now Turkmenistan, only reached the eastern edge of Asia Minor in the 11th century AD, and the Greeks fully controlled Asia Minor until the 15th century. So even after the Ottoman Empire was established, there was a large Greek minority in Turkey, just as there was a Turkish minority in Greece from the 16th century onwards, right up until the 1920s. Anyway, so he grew up in this polyglot, multi-religious city. He was from a well-to-do family. His father's a professor at the University of Athens and a prominent lawyer. So when he was 14, the family moved to Athens, which was lucky for him because of what transpired. The Second World War broke out. The Ottoman Empire was at war against the Allies, and Greece pursued a course of neutrality, which was very difficult. The king, Constantine I, who's married to the Kaiser's sister, Sophia, he was inclined towards Germany. Remember, he was of Danish and German blood himself, mainly. But a lot of the people were more inclined to the Allies. They were very Francophile. They thought that the British would represent freedom for them. They had kind of mixed feelings about the British for other reasons. The United Kingdom, up until this point, had been quite Turcophile. Remember, the British Empire had this friendly understanding with the Sublime Porte that they would tell people that they would back up the Ottoman Empire, which was then tottering, and in return, the Sultan of the Ottoman Empire, who was also the Caliph of all Sunni Muslims, would tell the faithful throughout the British Empire to be loyal to the British, remembering that the majority of subjects of the British Empire were Muslims. But anyway, for the first time, the United Kingdom was at war against the Ottoman Empire. This seemed to present a golden opportunity for the Greeks because they had a potent ally on their side, the Royal Navy being the largest empire in the world, Greece having such a long coastline, so many islands, obviously the Ottoman Empire having a long coastline as well, and the Greek communities in Asia Minor living close to the littoral in most cases. Anyway, I don't want to tell you the whole story, but the Allies landed at Salonika, then part of the Ottoman Empire. It's now called Thessaloniki, it's in Greece, and the Greeks eventually came in on the Allied side. But the Greeks didn't gain that much from it initially. But so he completed his secondary schooling, and he was just too young to serve in the First World War. He went off to the Sorbonne in Paris to study law because he'd acquired absolute mastery of French by this stage. So they tended to be very pro-French and thought the British were a little bit slippery, but the French were definitely on their side. So he came back in 1925, and by this time the Greeks had attempted to make their Megale idea reality, their great plan as they saw it, to take back much of Asia Minor, because remember, so many of the Hellenistic myths are set there, there's so many ancient Greek sites there, or so many sites of early Orthodox Christianity are in Asia Minor. But they didn't manage to take it back. There was a big defeat at the Battle of Inonu to the Turks. The Turks held the War of National Salvation, and the Greeks had to flee for their ships and sail across the Aegean. But so such Greeks as left behind were mostly put to the sword. Likewise, Turks who are living in Greece were sometimes killed as well. In the early 1920s, there's population exchange. So he wasn't to see his childhood home again until 1950, and there are almost no Greeks left living in Turkey. So he joined the diplomatic service, and he served in a number of posts. And then in the Second World War, he was fairly high up in the government. He got married, had children by that stage. And when mainland Greece was falling to Germany, they evacuated to Crete. And when that was about to fall into German hands, they moved to Egypt. eventually South Africa, and then finally when the Allies retook southern Italy, they moved back to Italy because of course it's just across the Ionian Sea from Greece. So he's back in Greece after the Second World War, and he served at a number of diplomatic posts. He had a junior position here in London. He was in Lebanon, Iraq, Jordan, and then finally in 1957 London as ambassador. And this position required a great deal of finesse. It was a very tricky time for Greco-British relations because of the Cyprus dispute. The ethnically Greek majority in Cyprus agitating for independence and really to rejoin Greece and then to be a united Greece, as in the major part of Greece and Cyprus. But the Turks saying we mustn't have this. There's a large Turkish minority there. Would it be divided, and on and on. The United Kingdom reluctantly agreeing to independence. And there'd been IOCA, as in the National Organization of Greek Fighters, as it was called, rebelling against British colonial rule. And so there was a lot of anti-British sentiment in Greece, and some people here in the UK were anti-Greek for that reason. So he had to handle that situation. So 1960, finally, Cyprus becomes independent. And then he stood down from that post in 1962, retired to Greece, and the next year got the Nobel Prize for Literature. He was in Greece when he saw things in Cyprus go wrong. He'd visited Cyprus and was very fond of the place, reminding him of his childhood home, because there's this sense of being banished from his birthplace. So then in 1967, the Greek colonels took over. There was a military junta backed by the CIA. And he said it was an anomaly because Greece is the birthplace of democracy. We shouldn't have military rule. And the United States didn't want a left-leaning government there in Athens. But anyway, and he openly denounced the regime, but he was so revered that the Greek colonels didn't dare to have him arrested. He died of pneumonia in 1971, and some of his poems were read at his funeral. Some of his poems were so inflammatory, so perilous to the military dictatorship that they banned them. So that is Georgios Seferis. That's enough now. Toodaloo.